There's a moment that breaks you, not loud, not public, just a flicker, when someone questions your worth, your character, your place. And before you can stop yourself, your mouth opens, you explain, you defend, you try to clear it up. But in that instant, something else happens. You hand them your power, because the second you defend yourself, you tell the world. You needed to, and they see it. They see the twitch in your voice, the shift in your eyes. They see you care, maybe too much, and what they don't see anymore is control. You don't want to admit it, but you've felt that sting, the silence after you explain yourself, and the room still doesn't believe you. The moment you thought words could rescue your image, and all they did was bury you deeper. That tightness in your chest that whispers, "Why do I always feel on trial?" You keep trying to be understood, but what if that's the trap? What if needing to be understood is the very thing making you easy to attack? Think about the most powerful people you've seen. Were they loud, defensive, or were they still, composed, just watching, letting everyone else scramble? There's a reason for that, and it starts with what happens when you stop defending yourself. You've been taught your whole life that speaking up for yourself is strength, that clarifying your intent is maturity. That if someone misunderstands you, the right thing, the responsible thing, is to explain. But what if that's not strength? What if that's submission dressed as logic? Let me show you what really happens when you defend yourself. Not in theory, in rooms where perception decides everything. Claire is a senior consultant at one of the most competitive firms in Manhattan. Calm, sharp, collected. In meetings, she doesn't interrupt, she doesn't overtalk. But when someone throws a sideways comment, Claire's ideas are always ambitious, is said with a smirk. She doesn't react. No flinch, no smile, just a slow glance, then stillness. You can feel the shift. The room waits for her to respond. She doesn't, and suddenly, the weight falls on the accuser. People start wondering, why did he say that? Was that necessary? Is he threatened? And just like that, Claire didn't lose a single ounce of authority, she gained it. Now compare that to James, new to the team, eager, smart, but a little too eager to prove he's harmless. So when someone questions his work, he leans forward. "Oh, I think you misunderstood. What I meant was," he keeps talking, clarifying. Smiling too wide, nodding, and that's the moment his credibility evaporates, not because he's wrong, but because he just confirmed that the person had the right to question him in the first place. Here's the brutal truth. Every time you explain yourself in a high-stakes setting, you're not just clarifying. You're conceding, you're playing in someone else's frame, and if they own the frame, they own the room. See, explanation feels like safety. Like you're closing a gap, fixing the misunderstanding, but what you're really doing is stepping into their courtroom and giving them the role of judge. The powerful don't do that. They never enter the frame, they watch it burn from the outside. And that's what makes people lean in. Claire didn't need to be liked. She didn't need the room to applaud her. She needed one thing only, to stay unshaken, and because of that, the people around her rewrote the story for her. They said, she's confident. They said, she's not bothered. They said, she must know something we don't. She said nothing. That's what explanation can't buy you. Mystery, control, projection. But still, part of you resists this. Because you've been trained to believe that being understood is the way to survive. And maybe it was, in classrooms, in relationships, in your childhood home. But in the adult world, where power decides who speaks and who listens, being understood is a luxury you can't afford. What you need is control, and control doesn't come from clearing your name. It comes from never letting them stain it in the first place. There's something unsettling about silence. Not the kind you choose when you're alone, the kind that happens in a room full of people, right after you don't defend yourself. You've been accused, mocked, undermined, and everyone turns to you, waiting for the counterstrike, the explanation, the flinch, but you stay still, and that's when the real discomfort begins, not for you, for them. Because silence, when paired with presence, creates a pressure most people can't handle. It turns the room into a mirror, and people don't like looking too long. Let me tell you about Alex. One night, at a rooftop bar in Chicago, Alex was with 5 others, friends, colleagues, half-friends, the kind of group that laughs just a little too loud. Somewhere between drinks and tension, someone leaned back and said, "Oh well, not all of us were born with daddy's money." Everyone laughed, but not Alex. He didn't smirk, didn't raise an eyebrow, didn't look away. He just held his drink and watched the one who spoke. No defense, no retort, just stillness. 10 seconds passed, then 20, and that's when it began. The guy who made the comment started to explain, chuckle nervously, look around the table. "I mean, just messing around, obviously, no offense, man," he kept going. "We all know you worked hard. I was just kidding." Still, Alex said nothing. By the time the bill came, the man looked small. Not because Alex humiliated him, but because he did it to himself. That's what silence does. It turns the need for validation into a weapon. It exposes insecurity in high definition. Here's the psychology behind it. Most people speak not to inform, but to relieve discomfort. When they insult, they expect a pushback. When they accuse, they crave engagement. It confirms they matter. When you don't give it to them, they start unraveling. And the longer you stay silent, the more desperate they become. They talk too much, over-explain. Look around for allies, repeat themselves. Each word they say shrinks them. You, meanwhile, haven't moved. You haven't blinked. And in that silence, something powerful is born, not explanation, not innocence, presence, the kind that shifts the room without volume. The kind that says, without saying, "I'm not here to be understood, I'm here to be remembered." Alex didn't defend himself. He didn't have to, because the man across from him couldn't stop trying to undo the damage he'd done to himself. And everyone saw it. Everyone felt it. Now ask yourself, what would have happened if Alex had laughed it off? Said no worries, or worse, defended his background. He would have lost everything he never had to say. That's the paradox of silence. It doesn't feel powerful when you're in it, but it becomes devastating when they realize they can't move you. Power isn't just about who talks loudest. It's about who defines the meaning of what's being said. That's the frame, and once someone else controls it, you're not just losing the argument, you're losing the entire room. Think of the frame as the invisible stage. Whoever sets it decides how everyone interprets the scene. If you accept their frame, even your silence becomes suspicious. If you reject it, quietly, you flip the entire narrative. Let me show you what that looks like. Marcus is a litigation consultant. Precise, always composed. In a courtroom, it's not his voice that dominates, it's his presence. During one case, opposing counsel made a subtle but pointed comment. "Well, I guess Marcus will remind us how things are done at Harvard." The room tensed. Eyes moved to Marcus. He didn't shift, didn't smirk, didn't correct the jab. He just glanced toward the judge's bench and returned to his notes. No defense, no acknowledgement. And something strange happened. People didn't laugh. They didn't agree. They questioned the man who spoke. Was that necessary? Was he intimidated? Why go after Marcus like that? Because Marcus didn't enter the frame. The speaker was left standing alone in it. And that's when the heat turned. Here's the truth most people never learn. When you defend yourself, you accept the premise of the attack. You admit that their version of the story has merit. Even when it doesn't, you say, without saying, "You're allowed to question me." That's what flips the power. It's not about being right. It's about refusing to accept their story as the starting point. Strong people don't rush to protect their image. They let others reveal who they are by what they choose to say out loud. When you control the frame, you don't need permission. You don't need defense. You define the room just by how you breathe in it. And when someone tries to drag you into their script, into their narrative, into their emotional pitch, all you have to do is this: stay still, stay present, let their words echo into a silence they weren't ready for. Most people think silence is passive, but in the right frame, it's domination. Marcus never corrected the record. He didn't need to. Because the moment he refused to dance on someone else's stage, the whole room watched the speaker trip over his own performance. That's not just strategy, that's command. There's a moment, just after silence, when they can't help themselves. They talk more, they add, they clarify, and with every word, they unravel. You didn't say anything. You didn't need to, because now they're the ones under the microscope, not because you made them look weak, but because they exposed it themselves. This is the collapse. Let me show you how it happens. Emily had been in a relationship for 3 years. Calm, kind, composed. Her partner, Mark, was passionate, emotional, always needed reassurance. One evening, mid-argument, Mark leaned in and said, "You just don't care about me anymore." The words hung in the air like a challenge. He expected a reaction, a defense, a desperate explanation of how wrong he was, but Emily didn't flinch. She didn't raise her voice, she didn't plead, she didn't list every small act of love from the last month. She simply looked at him and said, "That's not how I see it." And then she waited, not impatiently, not dramatically, just still. The silence stretched. Mark blinked, then repeated himself, louder. "I said, you don't care." Still no escalation from her. Now he looked around the room, unsure. His voice cracked slightly. "I mean, you've been distant, right?" He began justifying the accusation he made 5 seconds earlier, and Emily just sat there, unshaken. By the time the conversation ended, Mark had said too much. His tone had shifted, his position had weakened. His certainty had collapsed under its own weight, because when someone throws emotion at you and you don't catch it, they're forced to hold it, and most people can't. They panic, they overexpress. They lose control of their tone, their point, their frame. You didn't win the argument, you just refused to pick up their weapon. And without someone to fight, they fought themselves. This is the hidden strength of the still mind. It doesn't just resist chaos, it invites the other person to reveal theirs. You don't need to be louder. You don't need the perfect comeback. You just need space, stillness, presence, because most people aren't prepared to sit with their own energy. They throw it out, expecting you to absorb it. But if you don't, if you let it hang, if you let it echo, they start explaining their anger, then explaining their explanation, then wondering if they were out of line. And suddenly, they're the ones on trial. All you did was keep your seat, keep your eyes, keep your tone. That's not silence, that's control. Sometimes silence isn't enough. Sometimes the most powerful move is to disappear, not dramatically. Not in anger, just gone. No replies, no signals, no attempt to fix or explain, and that absence becomes a mirror. Because now, they're left alone with the weight of their own words. You've felt this before, online, in life. Someone says something sharp, passive-aggressive, maybe even cruel. They expect heat, expect backlash, expect you to show you care. But instead, nothing, not even a scene, and then it starts. They check back, they send a follow-up. You okay? Another message, just wondering where you stand. Then, maybe a post, something vague. Funny how people just ghost when things get real. It spreads, they talk to others, try to explain themselves before anyone even asks. And with every attempt to bait your return, their power slips away. Because now, it looks like obsession, and obsession without response. That's exposure. See, most people survive on feedback, even in conflict. They need the push and pull, the proof they still matter. So when you take that away, not out of pettiness, but out of indifference, it does something far more damaging than words ever could. It removes their reflection. They no longer see themselves through your reaction, and that forces them to face something raw. Their words might not matter as much as they thought. This tactic is subtle. It's not ghosting out of spite. It's choosing not to enter a game that was never yours, not blocking them, not deleting. Just stepping back and letting your absence say, "You're not my center." Think of it like emotional judo. They come swinging, you sidestep. Let their own force carry them into imbalance, because when someone lashes out and you don't meet them there, they spiral. They escalate, they perform their own collapse for anyone watching, and you haven't said a word, no one can quote you. No one can accuse you of playing dirty, you're simply quiet, and that quiet becomes power, not because you vanished, but because your stillness made their noise deafening. There's a kind of peace that only comes when you realize this. You don't owe anyone a reaction, you don't have to match their energy, you don't have to correct their misunderstanding. Sometimes the most strategic thing you can do is vanish long enough for them to reveal everything you never had to say. Sometimes you don't ignore the insult, you flip it, not with anger, not with defense, with precision. Because the real strategist doesn't block the blade, he turns it. Imagine this, you're in a pitch meeting in London. A glass boardroom. A senior exec looks across the table and says, "You're very confident for someone your age." Everyone watches your face, but you don't blink, you don't shrink. You look at him and say, "Confidence makes people uncomfortable sometimes." Short, soft, deadly, the room shifts. Now he looks reactive, now he looks emotional. You just flip the frame, and the best part, you never denied a thing. You didn't say, "No, I'm not arrogant." You didn't explain your track record. You didn't prove your humility. You made his accusation about him. That's the turn of the knife. When they say you're manipulative, say, "Only those who can't be influenced think that." They say you're fake. Smile. People always say that when they stop getting what they want. You didn't defend, you redirected. You made their emotional energy fold in on itself. See, most people who accuse aren't looking for truth. They're looking for dominance, and when you respond emotionally, they win. When you defend, they feed off it. But when you invert, you force them to explain themselves. You make them clarify their tone, justify their jab, answer their own weapon. And just like that, they're off balance, because now they're on trial. You said 5 words and made them squirm. This isn't cruelty. It's control. It's understanding that in power dynamics, the calm voice wins, the short line stings. The one who doesn't flinch becomes the one everyone watches. They'll say you're cold. They'll say you're hard to read. They'll say you think you're above it all. Let them, because the moment you stop trying to look innocent, you start looking untouchable. There's a moment when silence becomes something else, not avoidance, not strategy, aura. It's hard to describe. But you've seen it, that person who walks into a room and says nothing, yet everyone straightens up. The one who never explains, never overreacts, never needs to raise their voice, because their presence already speaks louder than anyone else's noise. That's not just charisma, that's composed power, and it's built, not gifted. You build it by choosing stillness when chaos calls your name, by pausing when your ego screams to explain, by watching when they expect you to attack. And every time you don't flinch, every time you hold the moment instead of reacting, you're laying another stone in the foundation of that presence. People feel it, because most of them are wired to perform, to justify, to win the approval of eyes that barely care. But when you don't play, when you don't react, you break the rhythm they've depended on their entire lives, and suddenly the game they know how to play doesn't work anymore. Let me show you what it looks like in real life. Natalie leads a design firm in San Francisco. Elegant, measured, rarely posts, rarely speaks unless she must, but when she walks into a negotiation, the temperature changes. At one deal review, a client challenged her quote, "That's unusually high for this market," and Natalie didn't smile, didn't debate. She just held eye contact for a beat longer than expected, then calmly said, "Then we're not the right fit," in no edge, no defense. And the client, they blinked, reconsidered, suddenly unsure of their own price knowledge. That's aura. It's not what you say, it's what people believe you could say, but choose not to. It's the pause between your breaths, the restraint in your tone, the fact that you never have to prove a thing, because the possibility of what you might do carries more weight than anything they can predict. And people don't challenge what they can't predict, they hesitate. They slow down, they doubt themselves before doubting you. Aura isn't something you announce, it's something you earn through repetition, stillness, restraint, decisiveness, and silence, not as absence, but as signal. You don't build aura by trying to look powerful. You build it by becoming the one person who doesn't need the room to agree before you act. And the moment people sense that, you're not just respected, you're remembered. You've been told to protect your reputation, to clear your name, to speak up when accused. But that advice belongs to a world that rewards noise, not power, because the truth is this: the more you defend, the more it looks like you need to. And the more you stay silent, truly silent, the more others start to wonder what kind of strength lies behind that stillness. Let's flip the script. You don't need a good reputation, you need a strong one. Good reputations are fragile. Built on smiles, apologies, soft traits, they can be shattered by rumor, undone by gossip, broken with one public moment. But strong reputations, they're not clean, they're heavy, they carry mystery, doubt, a little fear. And that's what makes them untouchable, because people don't attack what they don't fully understand. They hesitate, they watch, they feel a caution they can't name. Think about someone like Elias. Former special advisor, now an independent negotiator. Rumors swirl around him. Some say he's ruthless, others say he never loses a deal. No one knows exactly what's true, but no one dares move against him without thinking twice. That's not because he clarified the rumors, it's because he never did. Every time someone took a shot, he said nothing. No interviews, no rebuttals, no corrections, and because of that, he became larger than the accusation. He became myth. That's the power of not defending yourself. You let others perform their judgment, while you remain immovable. And the ones who remain still always look like they know something others don't, because power isn't about being right. It's about being above the need to prove it. Most people are still playing the game of approval, but when you stop explaining, stop trying to be liked, understood, cleared, you rise above that court altogether. And suddenly, people stop debating whether you're guilty. They start asking whether they should even be speaking your name. It starts small. Someone makes a comment, a passive jab, a subtle accusation. You feel the pull to respond, to clarify, to explain your intent, to restore your image. But you don't. You breathe. You stay still. You let the silence speak first, and in that pause, something begins to shift, not just in them, but in you, because the real power isn't in defending yourself. It's in realizing you don't have to, not here, not now, not ever again. This is where everything changes. You stop asking to be understood. You stop performing clarity for people who have already decided their angle. You stop proving worth to those who never earned access to it. You start defining your posture, your tone, your limits, and slowly, without trying, the world recalibrates around you. People speak differently, softer, slower, more careful. Not because you demanded respect, but because your silence taught them what to fear. That's what happens when you master restraint, when you realize explanation is a currency and you've stopped giving it away for free. You only speak when it shifts the ground. You only move when it bends the frame. You only show your hand when it's already too late for them to change their play. And every time you stay still in the face of pressure, you grow in silence, in strength, in aura, until eventually, you don't need to win the room with words. The room bends to you before you speak. You're not the loudest, not the most visible, but when your name is said, people listen differently. Because you've become something rare, not just respected, not even feared, but unreadable, and unreadable people rule rooms they haven't even entered yet.